Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Alana.
Welcome to This Too Shall Pass, Creativity in the Time of COVID-19. This is our second installment in a series about ways creativity sometimes thrives in both the arts and the sciences during a crisis. I'm Alana Quinn of the Cultural Programs Office of the National Academy of Sciences, and I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I'm joined by Rick Loverd, the director of the Science and Entertainment Exchange in Los Angeles. So we're representing both coasts today. My department, Cultural Programs, explores intersections of art and science through an array of public programs, including this one today, as well as exhibitions, some of which we're currently in the process of creating online, so please stay tuned for that. Both the Exchange and Cultural Programs are units of the National Academy of Sciences, a nonprofit private organization that was chartered by an act of Congress and signed by Abraham Lincoln at the height of the Civil War on March 3rd, 1863, to advise the nation on matters of science with independent, objective advice, initially related to the Civil War, and we continue to provide the government with objective advice on scientific matters today. If you think about it, we were formed during a crisis, and today we find ourselves in another crisis. And the Academy, as you might imagine, is very busy producing numerous reports related to various aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, at the beginning of many of these programs this summer, we've been sharing a few little fun tidbits of things that we've been up to or things we've seen online. I don't know about you, but I've been going for tons of nature walks, specifically to Roosevelt Island here in Washington, D.C., in the Potomac River. It's a wonderful national park that's just teeming with wildlife. And I actually just got some binoculars so that I can do even more bird watching. I have seen great blue herons, white egrets, pileated woodpeckers, even some wild turkeys. And I really find that when I'm out in nature, it actually can help foster my own creative thinking in ways that I approach my work. In order to get my art fix, I've been participating in some of the Phillips Collection's guided meditation sessions. They're on Wednesdays at lunchtime and they're free, and anyone can join from really all over the world if you want to. And they feature a work of art from their collection with a guided meditation, and then an educator comes on and gives you about 10 or 15 minutes of information about the work of art and the artist behind it. So it's a lot of fun. And one interesting fact, the Phillips Collection Museum was actually founded in response to the 1918 pandemic, which I didn't know until recently. I thought that was pretty interesting. So today we're going to be talking more about the pandemic. We're going to be talking about art, science, and creativity. And we're so pleased to be working with the Science and Entertainment Exchange again. I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Rick Loverd, to tell us a little bit more. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Alana. So I'm Rick Loverd. I'm the program director of the Science and Entertainment Exchange. For those of you who are new to the Exchange for this program, we are the bridge between Hollywood and the STEM community. We are a program of the National Academy of Sciences. So if you are a writer, producer, studio executive, actor, and you have a question as you're trying to craft a story for a piece of mainstream media, you can call us at 844-NEED-SCI. Sachi, if you could put that number up, 844-NEED-SCI, or you can contact us over email. We will get you in touch with an expert who can hopefully answer your question for free. It's a free exchange of ideas. We've done over 300 events of these times, 300 events of this type, and also over 3,200 consults. We've worked on virtually every Marvel film since Iron Man 2, not called Deadpool. So if you are a STEM professional, by the way, we don't just work on Marvel movies, all types of movies. But if you are a STEM professional and you're new to the program and you'd like to get involved, please don't hesitate to call us because we're always looking for new volunteers. So you may have noticed Ann Merchant's not here today. What? I know. Alana, you're doing a great job. That was fantastic. But I had to ask Ann for some of her brain droppings of the week. And forgive the term, Ann. So one link we're going to post is the Olympic swimmer Katie Ledecky swimming an entire length of an Olympic swimming pool with a glass of chocolate milk on her head. It is actually transfixing. It's amazing. And also a Bon Appetit recipe, very Anne, for chai tea that you can make at home that is delightful and delicious and won't take you half an hour to make. I also wanted to share with you, as a 20-year resident of Los Angeles, this book, this Taschen book on Los Angeles is absolutely amazing. I'm a big fan of it. Especially, I just picked out a couple of pictures. It's a really interesting history of LA. This is what it looked like to throw a beach party in 1898 for white people. I'm really glad that I'm not going to those beach parties because they seem super lame. And this is an incredible picture, I think, of a worker during World War II taking her lunch break while building bombers here in LA. So I thought that was pretty amazing, and I'm happy to share it with you. So today's event is more of a general conversation than you're used to. It's going to be more of a moderated conversation and not presentations on generally the connection, like how to communicate science through art. If you have a question at any point, there will be, the only structure really is the Q&A. There will be a Q&A at the end. I'm going to try to pull as many questions as I can. We have a very short period of time for Q&A, and I'll be passing them on to our moderator, Dr. Amanda Stanley, who I am extremely excited that we have today. She's the executive director of Compass, which is an organization that was founded by NAS member Jane Lipchenko, which anytime we can give a shout out to NAS, we are excited to do it. The mission is essentially to train scientists to be more effective communicators and to impact public policy. So this is a group that really knows how stories can be critical in communicating science and art too. So I also flagged this quote from when Amanda first came to Compass in 2017. She said, "I feel driven to play a more active role in the efforts to bridge the worlds of science and society. We face unprecedented challenges, but the energy and appetite for change has never been higher. I'm excited beyond measure to be leading Compass through such a dynamic time." And my first thought was, man, if she thought 2017 was dynamic, I can't wait to see what she has to say about 2020. So just to get things started, to get you in the mood for science and creativity, we have a short video that we think represents science in a time of creativity. And so I'd like to play it for you right now.
Well, hello, everybody. Rick, thank you so much for that introduction. I am absolutely thrilled to be here talking about two things that are really near and dear to my heart, art and science. And yes, if I had known now what I knew in 2017, I might have held some of my thunder. This is indeed an even more unprecedented time than 2017, and the urge for change is even stronger. So here today, we're talking about creativity in a time of COVID. I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Clifford Johnson, a physicist who studies the origin and evolution of the universe, as well as being a graphic novelist. Mike Smith, the co-founder of the NAMES Project AIDS Memorial Quilt, as well as community organizer and social justice activist with over 30 years of experience leading HIV, AIDS, and LGBT nonprofits. And Molly Webster, a features producer at Radiolab and host of the amazing series Gonads. If you haven't listened, you really should. It's a multi-part series that explores the parts of us that make more of us. So welcome everybody. I am so thrilled to be talking with you today. Clifford, I'd like to start off with you because just like in this video we just saw, you're somebody who combines art and science in your work. And I'm just really curious, have you always been somebody who draws? And what does your drawing do for your science? How do you combine that art and science? And does the art add to the value of your science?
Well, first of all, thanks everyone for letting me be part of this conversation. I wanted to take a step back and actually, in answering that question, reflect on how we came to the point where we even have to ask that question. It's one of the interesting things about our society, that somehow being a scientist and doing things that are considered artistic have somehow become a strange thing. And in my view, I think it should be more of a normal thing. And in fact, I would argue that many scientists I know, perhaps more than is portrayed in the media, dabble on both sides of this sort of quote unquote divide. And so I've always doodled and sketched and things like that. And in fact, doodling and sketching is part of what we do as scientists. If you look at a lot of scientists' notebooks or scraps of paper that are lying around that they've scribbled on, as they're thinking their science, they're actually doing something that in a different context would be recognized as the same kind of artistic doodlings as an artist might do. And I think that's really important to recognize, because I think we are more the same than we are different, the scientists and the artists, in terms of what we're really trying to do, interrogating our world, trying to understand it, figure out our place in it, express ourselves through it. All of those things are same for scientists and artists. So that's sort of my answer to that question. I amped it up a lot because I wanted to start using that as part of how I communicate as a scientist. And so I started teaching myself more deliberately how to draw certain kinds of things fluently. But I would say a lot of scientists sketch and doodle or some kind of arty thing.
Indeed, it's in all the training and leadership programs that we do for scientists. One of our core tenets is that all scientists should be safe and supported in bringing their whole selves to their work. And I've heard too many stories, like for example, a scientist who hid the fact for years and years that she was also a dancer. Right. And it feels like there's been a change of recognizing the reality that so many scientists do combine creativity in their work. And so now we have a Dance Your PhD contest every year. So it's been, I think, a really good change over the past few years of really supporting these full expressions of everything that we do to the bring to the table when we do science. So I'd like to open things up to all of our panelists. And I'd like you to think about that time when you felt like you were at your best creative self. And what does that space look like? What is the physical space, the environment, the energy, the mindsets you bring into it? I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what your best creative space looks like and how that's been changing in the time of COVID.
Certainly, I've never been one that works well in isolation. I've had a very tough time with COVID. So much of the world has moved to Zoom calls, and so much of my own creativity and the creativity of the quilt and the work that I do comes from the collaboration with either a core group of people who are taking a concept and twisting and turning and pulling, and you end up with something bigger than any of the pieces. Or in the larger sense of the quilt, it's really the collaborative work of 50,000 people or more who have made memorial panels. And the beauty that you see and the emotion that it carries when it's displayed out flat comes from that collaboration and that unity that comes from all those disparate voices. So I'm in a little bit of a well these days because I don't have that the way I'm used to, and I'm frustrated by it.
Yeah.
I would say mine is more of a 50-50 split almost, of like I need like moments of hyper collaboration and community, and then moments of like being by myself in the woods and not talking to people for days. And one of my friends describes it as like there's like an outward part of me, and then there's like the cocoon, and usually the outward precedes the cocoon. And some of that is because of my job, which is like, I'm a reporter, so I have to collect information, which requires being outward. And then once I have it all, I sort of go huddle. And then there are teammates that mix in and out of different parts of those processes. In COVID, it's been interesting because we're all remote, right, as everybody is. And so there are team meetings, is a lot more like typing and cohesion, mind cohesion's happening over like Slack or something, you know. But I also find that there's an interesting thing that's been happening where, and Radiolab's been experimenting with this, of just sometimes your art can exist outside of what you're actually thinking about. And there's been this interesting collapse of those two. I don't know quite how to say that, because art and what you're thinking about are always connected. But like sometimes you're like, oh, in my day job, I'm like reporting on butterflies. But at night, I'm like wondering about, you know, time or something. And they're intimately related, but also not. And there's been an interesting collapse during COVID where we've just really tapped into, I mean, you can't not be just thinking about COVID all the time in certain ways. And people are approaching that from different angles, from like social justice angles and from science angles and from, you know, community and isolation. And so I feel like there's been an interesting collapse for us and for me, where a lot of my day-to-day thinking is tied much more into my creative output.
Yeah,
it's interesting. You both mentioned about you know, the Zoom aspect, which we all have had to face, and I've been trying to find positives where I can, and I do think it's worth remarking, and maybe being a little contrarian, that Zoom has had a strange positive effect on some aspects of creativity, at least for me and some people in my field. And I should say, of course, I'm a theorist, so I as a scientist practicing, I don't have a lot of the logistical issues that say someone doing experiments who has to run a lab, who has to bring people together and all of that sort of stuff to do the science. I don't have that as a problem. However, bringing people together is still an important part. You brainstorm, you connect in various ways. There's no substitute for people being face to face. However, one thing that Zoom has done is that it has positively leveled the playing field in terms of access to each other as scientists globally. So there are seminars I've attended to get information about what's going on in people's work. There are then conferences I've attended, things like that. In the space of the last month, I've been all around the planet with Zoom and talked to people that I would never have had the opportunity to talk to as frequently. We meet each other up just randomly at other seminars and things like that. And that has been extremely positive in terms of everyone being connected to each other. And also, you know, I think that has opened up the access for things like people who may have had problems, whether it be financial or other logistical problems, who couldn't attend that international conference. They actually could, or they could at least spend a little bit of time at it because of Zoom. So that creative space for doing science and exchanging ideas, it's not ideal, the Zoom part, but I think as we learn to use it better, I think even beyond the pandemic, it's going to really have a positive influence on certain aspects of how we do things.
wonderful. Well, I'd like us to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about sort of the why behind all of our creativity and our science, and how we're looking to shape this world that we live in, and the power of art and science for creating change. Before we dive into that conversation, we're going to hear a short poem by Thomas Avina. And so, Meche, I'm wondering if you can play that video for us. Give us a second here. Okay, I'm not seeing this video, so maybe I'll just dive into a question and then maybe we'll jump back to it later time. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we might use art as a powerful way for connecting our hearts and minds and leading to social change. And Mike, you have so much experience with this. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the genesis for using quilts as a way to tell the story of HIV and AIDS. And, you know, what were you hoping those quilts would communicate? And as you reflect back, you know, all these years later, about, like, what are your reflections on this absolutely enormous impact these quilts had?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, I think that the desperation often leads to creative breakthrough. And I think certainly in our case, in my case, at the time the quilt started, 1,000 men in the Castro neighborhood of San Francisco had died, and another 2,000 were sick. And the president wouldn't say the word AIDS. There was no federal funding. People were being left to die in hospital corridors, in overcrowded ICUs, which sounds familiar. And the sense we all had was the country was moving on, and there wasn't going to, we were not going to be remembered. There was no one coming to our rescue. There was an event where they covered the front of the federal building with signs with the names of people who died. And to Cleve Jones, who had the idea, that wall of names kind of looked like a giant quilt. And when you say the word quilt, you think of your grandmother, you think of chicken soup and taking care of you when you're sick, all bundled up warm. And none of those were the emotions that the world was thinking around HIV. It was clearly, it's those people and we're okay. And so it's not our problem. And the quilt, rather miraculously, I think, broke through a lot of that noise. And because there's so much emotion in art, and certainly in the quilt that we laid out, it opened people's hearts in a way that their minds hadn't expected. And when we laid it out on the mall that first day in 1987, it really changed the dialogue. Literally overnight, small town newspapers had pictures of the quilt and were telling stories about AIDS, where there had been dead silence the day before. And it's one of those moments where, and I think the other thing that helped us succeed was we started out as a cluster of gay men in San Francisco sewing, and we didn't sew, we bed sheets and spray paint. They didn't look so good. About a few weeks before that big event though, we had 800 pieces of overnight mail from mothers all across the United States who couldn't tell people in their church group that their adult son had died of AIDS. They didn't have anywhere to turn, and they made panels and they sent them off to a bunch of gay men in San Francisco they didn't even know. That's how bad the isolation and the desperation was. And when we laid that quilt out, it wasn't just the work of a particular community. It already reflected the nation. And it really changed the dialogue literally overnight. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal story of lasting impact, and just that ability for art to reach through and just do away with all of these artificial barriers we put between each other, and just connect as human beings.
Yeah, I can't think of another thing that would have worked right then. You know, the conversation wasn't there. It was a one-way monologue. And the science was there, but again, you're too in the head and you needed to get into the heart, and we tripped into a wonderful vehicle for doing that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so I heard that our little video is ready to go of this poem that we wanted to hear. So Meche, okay, we'll give this a second try. You ready to go? Right.
Hello, I'm Philip Clark, one of the co-editors of the anthology Persistent Voices, Poetry by Writers Lost to AIDS. I'll be reading a poem today by the San Francisco-based AIDS and arts activist Thomas Avena. The poem comes from his 1997 collection, Dream of Order. And the title, To the Artist Dying Young, is an allusion to the famous poem by A.E. Housman, To an Athlete Dying Young. So this is Thomas Avena, To the Artist Dying Young. Disease has its own motion, doesn't it? The implacable motion of a glacier and its indifference to your will. Don't be deceived, as if I had no more force than a whisper or something already dead. I want you to fight the bastards. Now black eyes push with fever from the devoured face. You are a skein of bones unraveling, vapor and lymph, light as champagne. In the dusty, sour milk-scented room, you select colors. A streak of primary yellow blisters. Daub in gray, in black. Color becomes unbearable. It is the slowest dance. You didn't choose your partner with his gray hood or his sardonic joker's face, yet gracefully he draws you. And when you stumble, he comforts you with an iron grip. He is not the suave lady dressed in black who exits through a mirror.
So here are two examples of the way of the power that art can have to connect us, to reach through and tap into those very deep-seated emotions we have of care and love and support for each other. And you know, as scientists, sometimes we struggle to do the same thing. And so what we're here is talking about is this nexus between art and science and how to weave these things together. And I'm wondering, I'd just like to open this up to all the panelists of, you know, what are your experiences of combining art and science to create change? And, you know, if we combine the two, the soul and the data, can they together create more powerful narratives and stories?
So in my own efforts, you know, a lot of what I try and do, my little sort of theme, as it were, is trying to put science back into the general culture where it belongs, because I still want to fight against this sort of arbitrary schism where science is this special thing over in a corner for special people. And what I'm doing is, to echo some of the words Mike was saying, is I'm trying to encourage people to have dialogue, and that means dialogue with scientists, dialogue with science itself, and dialogue with each other in the context of science, which I don't think we do enough of as a general, in the general public. So I want people to, at the dinner conversation, feel free to go from talking about the latest thing that's happening in politics or pop culture over to maybe the latest scientific discovery, and it not be sort of this weird thing that's sort of off on its own. And so one of the things I was trying to do is figure out how to do that. And so in a book I wrote a few years ago called The Dialogues, it was all about trying to not write the usual book that people in my field, people in academia are usually going to write. And those kinds of books are fine. I just feel we needed to broaden those kinds of books. So I wanted to go away from the sort of the monologue of the scientist telling you what you're supposed to think about certain things, and rather find ways of invite people to talk about the science. So hence the term, the dialogue. Then the artistic component really grew in my mind, precisely because it occurred to me that it would allow, first of all, a certain warmth to come through, perhaps be a little bit more inviting. I could actually sort of show certain kinds of things that are usually regarded as off in the world of science and maybe not even shown, to actually sort of show how they could be on the page right alongside something that you would consider to be artistic, because they can be, as I said earlier. I think a lot of our tools that we use for thinking are very visual. In fact, some of the most powerful tools we use in science are actually, if you looked at them, strip them down, or even don't strip them down, just look at them as we use them, they're actually artistic tools. They're cartoons sometimes, like the Feynman diagram is a famous example. So I wanted all of those I wanted opportunities to bring all of those things in and have them on the page. And the natural thing to do seemed to be to draw them. And people seem to have responded to that, and tells me that I'm sort of on the right track, I think, at least on certain aspects. You get more people, a broader group of people coming in and engaging with it if it isn't that sort of, it's just sort of more stuff that they remember from the classroom that perhaps didn't work for them. So broadening it out to more people, more different kinds of people, and as you said, Amanda, engaging with more of ourselves when we engage with anything. We don't just do it through one sort of set of narrow channels. We use all the different aspects. So the visual, the artistic, the scientific, the analytical, the emotional, all of those things. I think art combined with science can really help bring those things out. And so that's what I've been trying to do in my own way.
Wonderful. And Molly, I know this is what you do, right, in Radio Lab. And
I was just thinking that both Mike and Clifford bring up two interesting individual points that are my day-to-day, which is one, Mike talked about just emotions. And that is something that we're constantly thinking about. And I obviously believe this deeply, but think like storytelling is a way to get at that emotion. And we happen to do audio storytelling, but there's visual storytelling and sculptural storytelling and spatial storytelling. And so, I just think like tapping into emotion. So like if I'm talking to a scientist, there's a lot of facts, but there's also the emotion of like, who is this human that I am on a line with who is telling me these facts? Like you can just get emotion and humanity from them, let alone if there's a larger story with a beginning, middle, and end that they're either in the middle of or just heading to. And then Clifford talks about the monologue of so often these things are, one directional where science is over here and it's shouting down to all of us small people down here. And it's, what we're really constantly trying to do is to break that up, to like bring multiple voices into the room. And there's a way, even if you only have one person in a room, you can broaden the scope of it. And so these are 2 points that we and I think about a lot at the show.
So I want to take a question from the audience because I think it follows along really nicely from this conversational thread, which is recognizing that the ways in which we can interact with art right now are very different, right? We can all tune into the podcast, but maybe we're not going to museums. We're also interacting with science in a different way where, a lot of the science museums are closed or scientists may not be meeting physically in a lab space. And so, for all of us who are trying to connect with science and art, what does that look like right now and in this online world that we're in?
Well, I've certainly seen some extraordinary technological collections of dance and music on a Zoom screen. I mean, there's been several really spectacular collaborations and postings online of people working in an isolated way, but coming together to form a symphony. And it's spectacular to see. And you have to think that that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. I think the problem with this is we're all in our own little Zoom world. And I think that there's a lot of things being done out there that we don't see yet. In a sad kind of way, we may be just at the beginning of this new lifestyle. And people may be creating tremendously interesting things, but haven't found a way to get them out there yet. I'm hopeful that that's the case, that we will see a boom in artistic expression that comes out of this when we come out of this.
Well, and similarly related to that is the question of who has access now to art, right?
Right.
You know, spending time in DC, there's all these free museums and anybody can go and see and be a part of art. Boy, you know, who has access to Zoom and online spaces? So there's a lot of questions there to explore and how we keep art and science connected. So Clifford, are you trying to jump in? Yeah.
And yes, there are some wonderful resources, and as you both pointed out as well, there are you know, not everyone has access to some of those resources, even though they may be online. But let's also not forget that there's an important resource, which is the spaces we're in, and science is everywhere, and science and art is everywhere, and you know, a person who is not a, you know, quote unquote qualified artist or scientist has every right and every opportunity whenever they can to create some of their own, to explore it of their own. So you know, step out, you know, look at stuff online, that's awesome, but every now and again I would say close those things down and step outside and look around. Just yesterday I was actually looking at this book with my son, my 5-year-old son, and it was all about the kinds of science experiments you can do in your own backyard or in the park, or, you know, just on the stoop outside. Okay, and it's amazing the kind of things you can do with a you know, a few pieces of junk from the recycling bin and some sticky tape. You can actually have a remarkable lot of fun exploring, and not just sort of kid stuff, because we often think of those kind of things as for kids. But the whole business of wondering about our world is for all of us. And sometimes it's nice to see it through the eyes of children, but you don't have to. You can get one of those kid exploring books in the, you know, as exploring science books, even if you don't have a kid, and go do some stuff outside or in the kitchen with your everyday cooking ingredients. It's amazing what you can find. But last thing, I should say also, the same thing can be said for art. Even if we have a lot less time now, carrying around, as I always do, I carry around a little sketchbook and a pencil. And even if I have 5 minutes, just learning to look at the world by trying to sketch a thing is really powerful. And get over that nonsense about I don't have the right kind of brain to do art or sketch or what have you. Yeah. That's all nonsense. Just dive in there and do what you can, and try and you know, just engage with art in that way. That's hugely important too.
Yes, definitely. Wonderful. All right, we're gonna turn to our last little video of the day here. We have one more video that tells a story about what life has been like during lockdown in New York. And so Amiche, I wonder if we can tee up the New York Minute.
Hello and welcome to The World at One with me, Sarah Montague.
That is such a wonderful video. It makes me smile every time. Some of those feel a little too familiar. So, you know, this gets me thinking a lot, and Molly, you alluded to this a little bit earlier on, that video is so evocative about what life was like for someone locked down in New York. And Molly, you were able to tell these amazingly evocative stories on Radiolab. And as we're trying to do more to share who scientists are and to as you know, Clifford, as you said, reduce these rather artificial connections. How do you tell a good science story?
Oh, geez. I hope it's a little different every time. But I don't know. I think I'm, I'm constantly trying to drag myself and then the listeners with me into an experience. And Clifford sort of gestured at this in one of his earlier comments of, it's not something out there, it's us all together, right? So it's like, can I get into a place? And at this point, I can't get into a place, but can I have someone record a voice memo that gets me into a place? Like we did a story a few months ago about a biosecurity 3 lab that was working on SARS-CoV-2. And so we had we asked and the scientists did it, but they turned on their voice memo and they, put their phone in a Ziploc bag and they carried it as far as they could into BSL-3 land. And we were able to use that tape and it was really lovely. So I think about like, even in these times, like what are ways we can be immersive? And then also it's always about just nuggets of humanity. And that can be anything from, Radiolab has the shtick where it's a lot of like, you'll hear us try and connect with people and it doesn't go well. And, and then the line drops and then we get back together again. And it's just like, it may be a small microsecond, but everyone feels real. And the fact of the matter is, I went into science journalism because I just deeply believe like the world is science. It's like this interaction, stepping out my door, being inside an air conditioning, like it permeates everything. There's no way you can be a human and not engage with it. And, if we can do that in our stories, it's somehow make people feel that connection. See that science is just not this like big capital S scary thing, but just this like lowercase integration all around us. Like that is what I sort of aim for.
Wonderful. I want to make sure that we take a few questions from the audience here. And one that has come up a lot in various ways is around how do we actually foster spaces for people to be creative? Is this something that can be learned or is it innate? And how do we make sure that these spaces for creativity are as inclusive as possible? Very simple questions to address in a few minutes.
One for each of us. I'm deferring to Mike.
Oh God!
In this moment, and then it'll come back around.
Well, I've often said in other situations that I don't think of myself as creative. I think of what I do with the quilt is hold a space for other people to be creative. That, if you look at the different stories that come out of the quilts, you will find somebody who is angry at the government, somebody else who's completely down a well of grief, someone else who's celebrating someone's life in a fascinating and unique way. And our job is often just to create that safe space for them to do that without judgment. And then our job is the mechanics of getting it all sewn in and getting it out someplace. And in this current environment, we're not getting it out anyplace. There are no displays going on right now, and most of the workshop is switched over to making masks with leftover fabric. So, we've found a way to be useful even in this period. But I think a lot of it is a tough game of how do you hold a space, and you have to be very thoughtful about it. Every little thing you do sends a signal that constrains or rejects, and you need to constantly be pushing at the boundaries to make sure there's room for everybody.
Yeah,
hard to do.
I'll just jump in and say, inclusivity is just so much of seeing it and allowing it in each other. I think that I grew up in a very rural part of America and was not in, you know, was not a cultural touchstone. And so art was like not of me and not of that place. And I didn't, you know, it was like other people did that. And then I remember being at Radiolab a few years ago, and I had never seen myself as an artist or would have described myself as an artist. And one of my colleagues referred to me as an artist, and I was just like arrested because I thought, what? No, 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 no. That's like what other people do. I'm just sort of like, you know, dorky Molly Webster, who's like really into science, like on this side, you know, like it was a really interesting moment because she, kind of similar to what Mike is saying, like created a space, but also just saw a thing and then in someone else recognizing it and seeing that it can be small or big or complex or super simple. It could be a sketch in your notebook while you're listening to birdsong, and, you know, or it could be an amazing quilt that like has a political message. Like, I think just recognizing that art, I don't know, is just us, and then helping other people to see that in themselves is hugely important.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I try and do, just in some ways echoing and maybe amplifying some aspects of what Molly said, is trying to somehow find ways of inviting people more. And obviously, I don't necessarily mean I have a physical space, but certainly I think we as scientists need to do more of inviting people to participate in the conversation about science, and have their own conversations about science. So a lot of what I do is just trying to encourage that, because we don't own it as scientists. So you know, through the exchange and sometimes through my own contacts, I talk a lot to filmmakers, for example, about science and help them tell their stories and things like that. And a lot of my scientist colleagues, you know, they're not necessarily super kind about that, because it's somehow seen as, you know, you're wasting your time with these people doing Hollywood stuff, and they're going to get it wrong, and it's all going to be, you know, right. And, you know, and there's this fashionable thing. You have prominent scientists who pronounce on how many things this movie got wrong in the science and blah, 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 blah. And I feel somehow that isn't as inviting to our artist colleagues as I think it ought to be. And I think it really should be more of, we don't own science, right? We are privileged to be paid to do it and investigate scientifically for a living. But the things we find are for everybody. And any more than, you know, an artist will tell you, they create a piece of art, they put it out there, and it's no longer theirs, right? You do with it what you will. You slice it up your own way. And so I feel that somehow, even though that science may be quote unquote misused, whatever that means, as long as it's not hurting anybody, I think it's okay for everyone to play with it. And you never know what might come of that. And mix it all up with art and science and expression and all those things, because it's part of our culture. And so that's my way of creating a space for people, which is just to go, it's okay to play with these ideas, put them in your art, push them in directions the scientists didn't intend. Just don't hurt anybody, and have, you know, don't misinform anyone, don't get anyone doing
no more evil
dangerous
geniuses.
things. Yes. No more evil geniuses, and no more, you know, crazy remedies for things based on ignorance, and you're good to go.
I love that scientists don't own science, because there is a way in which you like, oh, you guys have exclusive access and you just let me see some of it sometimes. You're like, oh wait, no, that actually doesn't make any sense. You just decided to stare at it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a lot about what my organization does at Compass, right? Is trying to, it's all about democratizing science, right? It's about making sure that all scientists are connecting and engaging and opening up those avenues for dialogue. And it's an amazing thing to be a part of. I want to thank you all so much for the conversation. I feel like we could keep going for hours, but we're going to stop here because I need to turn things back over to Rick. So thank you all. And I'm gonna, yep, there we go. There's Rick. And thank you so much. And
thank you, guys.
There'll be, I think we're gonna keep posting some resources in the chat here for everybody. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks to our speakers today. Also, in particular, Clifford, you did a terrible job at telling people how great your book is. Really, MIT Press, you got to go out and get it.
Thank you.
So, by the way, I got a copy as a gift from my mother. She loved it. I'm just saying. There you go. So I want to say next week we will close our summer season of events. And we will, so this is our penultimate of the series, but we will be back. And I have a lot of thank yous, starting with our speakers, our AV, Tech, and Meche. Thank you for all your work today. Thanks to the team in DC, Courtney and Jeff, and the team in LA, Sachi. Of course, I need to thank our sponsors, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, who made this event possible today. As well as the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Disney, Film Nation, Google, Lyda Hill Foundation, Corteva, and individual donations like you. For those of you who donated today, that actually makes a huge difference in our ability to keep doing these events. By the way, love the idea in the Q&A. Somebody suggested we do science and cooking. I think Anne's gonna like that idea too. So we're gonna try to figure out how to make that one happen. No promises, but I'll do what we can. Got to turn it over to Alana for a minute.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of our speakers and the moderator, and also for everyone who attended. I thought this was such a thought-provoking conversation about the role of creativity in the arts and sciences. I wanted to put in a plug for some of the work of the speakers in case you'd like to learn a little bit more about their work. Check out Molly Webster's Radio Lab segment about the 1918 pandemic and how it's influenced art, culture, and politics over the past 100 years as a way for us to think about what the next 100 years might look like after COVID-19. Also, Mike Smith was featured on the PBS NewsHour, brief but spectacular take about turning COVID grief into action. It was fantastic. You could see a lot of great images of the quilts as well as the masks that he's involved with making now. And Clifford Johnson had a very important cameo in a new science fiction film called Palm Springs that actually he also consulted on some of the science in the film through a connection with the Science and Entertainment Exchange. And one last thing, we have an event on August 20th. It's the DC Art Science Evening Rendezvous, looking at an artist residency at a field station in California. So I hope you can join us for that. Thanks.
So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this penultimate episode of the season. Next week, we're going to be back with, it's going to be a conversation about a film. So if you RSVP for the event, you will have access to watch the film at your leisure at home, and then before the event, and then see a panel including the film's director. The film is called Human Nature by Elliot Kirshner, and we have a trailer for that film to take you out today. If you're attending today, you will get an invite for that movie and for that event. So Meche, if you could take us out with the trailer, we'll see you guys all next week.
Mother Nature gave us something that's richer than our imagination.
We saw a very peculiar pattern.
Never seen anything like this before.
I remember him saying, remember this word, CRISPR.
We've never had the ability to change the fundamental chemical nature of who we are, and now we do. And what do we do with that?
David's doctor told me, just hold on, there's something coming.
You can actually use CRISPR to change DNA. You can actually do it.
We could engineer a single gene that could potentially make us all more muscular. But should we make that universally available?
Что человек может создавать человека, человек, который может воевать без страха и без боли. И вот то, о чем я сейчас сказал, может быть страшнее ядерной бомбы.
Should we really be manipulating the heredity of future generations given our lack of knowledge about so many things?
I don't know where you draw the line between not having albinism and deciding your kid needs to be an extra foot taller so they can be a good oarsman and go to Yale. Where is that line? Who's going to draw that?
Anything that will stop my child from suffering, I'm for.
You know, draw this ethical line wherever you want, but don't draw it in front of my disease.
What does that mean for this science, where we have the capacity to edit in some things that we think are important? Are we playing God?
You don't realize it's disruptive until you look backward. Often you don't realize that you're in the middle of a revolution until after the revolution has occurred.